record on this computer. My second time doing this. Might actually get the hang of it. Put the headphones on. Test this here. All right, we're live. I'm sure there's some of you in the audience that are laughing at me a little bit right now because I'm figuring this out as I go. And there's Effie. Hi, Effie, my co-host. Everybody there in Zoom land, give us a moment while we're figuring out our technical difficulties. It'll be just a moment. Make co-host. There you go. And Effie, I don't know how we hide you this time like we did before, but I don't know that we need to. Try one more time. There we go. I got it. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I think we figured it out. Welcome to whatever episode this is of Lightroom Classic Live. This edition, we are going to, as we've learned by all the emails, going to be talking about organization. So I'm hosting this one myself. We don't have any guests this time. I think we have a special guest for next one. So I'm not going to really say what we're going to be doing for next month yet, but in another week or two, I'll send you an email and that will explain either we're going to do another one like this, where it's just kind of office hours and I'm going over a particular topic, or if we have another special guest next time. So to be continued. For those of you who are chiming in for the first time or joining us for the first time here, I am Jason Bradley, the owner of Bradley Print Services and Photographic Center, located in Pacific Grove, California, in the heart of the Monterey Peninsula. Here at the Photographic Center, we have a gallery, as you can see in part behind me, and we have more images on the other wall. We're a full functioning print lab, and we also teach photography. We do mostly nature and underwater and wildlife photography, but we do all kinds of things. We do studio work and still lives, etc. So we do all kinds of stuff. That said, some business to handle here in terms of things that we have coming up. I won't go down the whole roster of events, but if you visit either of our websites, which is bradleyprintservices.com or bradleyphotographic.com, just click on the events link and you'll see things that we have upcoming up both in our area here and outside the area. But speaking of which, I should point this out, as these emails have been coming to you over the last couple of weeks about updating you of the last Lightroom Live we had with our special guest, David Duchemin, and even the one before that with Eric Joseph, and now with this one. We do record all of these. We're recording this one now, and then we're going to put the video on our website for all of you to see and come back, because not everybody can attend these, and some of you might want to revisit the topics. So if that's the case, don't worry. At any time, you can go to my website. I mentioned we have two, but when I say my website, I mean bradleyphotographic.com. And if you click on blog, you'll find the video recordings of all of these. So far, we have the one from Eric Joseph, we have the one from David on there, and in about 2 days, this recording will be on there as well. So at any time, you can go back to bradleyphotographic.com to the blog and see those videos. Another important piece of business is that if you are receiving emails from us with some wording on, feel free to click this link here if you have any questions you want to submit for the next Lightroom Live. So to help make sure that we're covering the topics that you want us to cover. Well, do that. However, if you're receiving these emails, there is no need to ever re-register for the next Lightroom Live. You are on our mailing list, and you're going to automatically get, if you see the email, look down the email, you're going to see the Zoom link for the next one. Just scroll down and you'll see it. You're already registered, no need to re-register. Just find that link, and that's all you need for the next one. And of course, the next one will now be the first Tuesday of November. So we'll see you back. You can just use this link that you used for this one. It's going to be the same link for the one for November. It's going to be the same link for the one to December. There is no need to re-register. So that said, if we send you an email, saying special Lightroom Live like we're doing tonight, where we're inviting you to submit questions ahead of time, then click the link and go to the page on either bradleyphotographic.com or bradleyprintservices.com and submit that question ahead of time so we can make sure, again, we're covering the topics that you want us to cover. And we did a lot of that. In fact, we have 14 pages of questions here from you guys that we'll get to most of them at the end. Some of them are redundant, so we're going to do our best to answer every single one of them. If I don't, then I'll get with you individually by email. But feel free to even chime in here. There's a Q&A at the bottom of your screen there. There's a way to raise your hand. I think if you're raising your hand toward the end there, we have a way to bring you in. I'm still figuring out Zoom webinars. I'm not good at this yet, but we're getting there. We're getting better each time. I'm hoping that the camera and the microphone are better this time. I'll figure that out at the end of it when I view the recording. But anyway, I digress. If you have questions, chime in with the Q&A at the bottom there of your screen or raise your hand, but we'll try and get through all of these here. So with that said, let me start sharing my screen. And I want to come over to my keynote presentation. And the title of this one being Everything in Its Place, the Basics of Archiving and Photographic Organization. It's like the reason that we all should use Lightroom is that it has the capability of, not just being a editor or a developer or a raw file developer, which, other programs have. There's lots of other programs can compete with Lightroom. Of course, ACR, Adobe Camera Raw and Photoshop technically is the same exact thing, technologically speaking, that the develop module is in Lightroom. The chassis is the same. The user interface is a little different between what you see in Photoshop with ACR and what you see in Lightroom. But in terms of the math used with the algorithms, the sliders that are available, the technology with the masking and the AI stuff, there's no difference functionally. But there are competitors out there. But one of the things that makes Lightroom so good is that it's an all-encompassing photo management program. So we have ability to play with our images, not just in develop module, but we can organize them. We can organize them all kinds of ways and keep track of them, and not just some of our images, but tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of images at a time, and all keep them in one location, one catalog, in one folder on one hard drive array, and it'll keep everything organized for us. But it also does output. But anyway, I digress. Everything in its place, the basics of archiving and photographic organization. And this is the basics. We have a workshop coming up. Well, let me just tell you about it here. Before I do that, a little bit of business in the sense that you see on the wall behind me, I just started a show about a week and a half ago on images that I shot in Kenya over the last several years. And we'll be taking a group there in January of 2025. If any of you have not been on safari or want to go back again and photograph places like the Masai Mara or Amboseli, reach out to us. We are leading a trip, limiting it to 12 photographers. So keep that in the back of your brains. We do have a workshop, an actual workshop, where it's not a 1 hour session, but an all-day session working with me in Zoom. We're going to keep the class sizes smaller. What we're doing here at the webinar, no limitation. Hundreds of people show up for this, but not the case with the developing workshop that we have coming up in October 14th. So just less than a couple weeks away. Again, it's an all-day session. Bring some of your images, but I'm going to go in depth into how to work the develop module, raw file workflow, what my approach is for developing, and then of course offer you tips for how you can approach developing in such a way that you can learn to develop your own sense of style, coax out your own voice, etc. But speaking of organization, in December, yes, it's another couple months away, but in December, I'm going to have an all-day session on organization and workflow, where I'll go into depth into this stuff that I'm not able to do today. Again, this is just me kind of giving an overview on the basics of organization to give you a good primer to how to think about it when you're approaching how to keep your archive organized from day to day. And this too, I'll say this, a full day session is not going to be as comprehensive necessarily as I'd like, because there's so much to talk about when discussing the library module and all the ins and outs. I shouldn't say that. I should say importing and and the library module and exporting and working with Photoshop and then bringing stuff back to Lightroom or other third-party apps like Nik or DxO or Topaz or these things, and having all of these things play each other. But we'll give as comprehensive as a thing as we can give doing a full day on December 9th. So you can access either one of these to register, I should say, for either one of these Lightroom in-depth workshops by going to, again, either bradleyphotography.com, bradleyprintservices.com, and signing up there, okay? There's one other thing I wanted to say on that. It'll come back to me. Oh, yes, very, very important. Because this is just a basic thing, I'll kind of treat you guys to a little something to reinforce the concepts that I'm going to talk about here today, but also then go a step further. What I mean is I've written a 4-part article series on organization. I call it Tidying Up. It's all focused on keeping your stuff organized in the library module. And tomorrow, I'll send you the first 2 articles. One of the first article is really going to reinforce the concepts that we're talking about here. And that is, again, the basics of organization. And we'll start going into more depth. The four different articles will go deeper into keywording, go deeper into categorical organization versus applicative or qualitative, et cetera. And I'll start sending you the first 2 tomorrow, and then send you another one a week later and another one a week later. So I want you to wrap your heads around this. I'm here to kind of help you guys with this stuff. So I'll start sending you those articles tomorrow to help reinforce these concepts. Okay, so everything in its place. And this is a old quote we've all heard this before. This came from Ben Franklin. It's actually a place for everything and everything in its place. And what this thing implies is that clutter is easier to arrange if you've conceived a way to arrange it, right? Around the house, this concept is easy. We have, put our socks in the sock drawer and our shirts in the shirts drawer and our pants in the pants drawer. And if we have a place for our stuff, that's where it goes. We can stay organized. We can stay clutter-free in our lives, hopefully, if we stay on top of it, right? Staying on top of it is very important. But with digital photography, it's a bit of a daunting thing nowadays because we are taking so many pictures from shoot to shoot and trip to trip. We're inundated with files like we've never had to deal with before. And of course, if we're going from Lightroom to Photoshop or Lightroom to another program or Lightroom to somewhere else, where there's different file formats that we have to deal with, not just our RAWs, but, well, then there's DNGs. Are we converting to DNGs? Should we convert to DNGs, PSDs, TIFFs, so there's JPEGs, there's all kinds of stuff. And some of the questions I've been asked here already are things like, well, I have over 100,000 images in my library. Is there a limit to how much I can put in a catalog? I have, 250,000 in mine, and I've worked with photographers. I trained a photographer up in British Columbia once that had, I think, 700,000 images in one catalog. That catalog, admittedly, was running a bit slow, but you can still use it. So to give you a clear answer on that question of is there a limit, and there really isn't, as far as I know, a limit, but it's the more you put in there, the more it might start to chug. So there's ways, if you get to that point where you're dealing with 250,000 or 500,000 images and you start to notice your catalog is running slower and slower and it's chugging, there are then techniques that one can practice to speed things up, to optimize your catalog, to thin some of it out in a way that will help it run faster. Hardware you can put on your computer to help you. Your computer might not be maxed out in terms of the kind of hardware you're using. Anyway, I digress again. But this is the kind of thing that we're inundated with, this thought of files and files and files. And how do we start to organize? Well, the first thing I want to talk about here to wrap our heads around what organization is, so we can then think creatively on how we can structure our workflow to suit our needs, our style, our workflow. Because what I might do with my workflow might not necessarily what you need to do with your workflow or the person behind you with their workflow, because we all structure our lives differently, our workflow differently. So let's talk. I'm going to give a kind of a broad perspective on what organization is. First of all, there's categorical organization. There's applicative organization, qualitative organization, and organization by state. So there's all kinds of ways we can organize our stuff and stay organized, first of all. Categorical is the thing that we probably think most about. It's the thing that's in the tip of our brains as we put our images first onto our computer or onto our hard drives, is organize something categorical, right? Organized by way of, say, a region, a specific location, the subject or subjects, by date, by project we're working on, by a style that we're working with. There's all kinds of categories, but one thing that us nature photographers will do as a very common practice is to take our images off our camera, put it on our computer, and then put it in a folder that will be either the place we just went to and photographed, or the regions went to photograph. I went to Africa and went on safari. Well, there's my Africa folder. And then I went to Grand Canyon. I'll put them in a Grand Canyon folder. Well, all those folders with all those locations, it's categorical organization. There's all kinds of ways we can do that. Applicative organization by way of curation for, say, print, for a client, for a slideshow, social media, or any kind of organized presentation. So organizing, starting to set, I like to use the metaphor of like a playlist. We all play with iTunes or Spotify or Amazon Music, and then we can start to take music and set it aside in certain playlists or stations or things like that, and set it aside for a specific kind of use. Same thing here. We can set images aside for a specific kind of application, one of these kinds of things. Qualitative organization, separating the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, good images from the bad, the usable from the garbage. And there's ways of sifting through things that will save us a lot of time, for sure. And then there's organization. You can organize things by the state of which your image is in. We all have a workflow. Sometimes we add keywords to things. Sometimes we develop things. Sometimes we do this to that image. We do this to another image. And our workflow might get interrupted, especially if we're dealing with big archives, big libraries of images. We might not be able to go from A to D in our workflow in one session. We might have to stop and work on this and stop and work on that. So you can organize by state to keep you on track. I might want to, for an example, make a smart collection, so it's called. Talk more about those later. But make a smart collection, which will keep track of images that have been keyworded versus not been keyworded. So later, if I forget to keyword a set of images, I can always go back to that smart collection, refer to it, and they could just automatically see all of the unkeyworded images for me to go back and add that kind of metadata to, right? So organization to keep you organized, what I like to call it. You can segregate developed from undeveloped images. Another example, keywords from non-keyworded images, native formats from DNG. Another question I got on all of these sheets here is, this individual was creating DNGs upon import. And if you're doing that, you'll know that creating a DNG upon import is an extra step in the import and will slow you down. So first there's the copying the image from the card onto the external hard drive, right? But after you've done that, well, then there's a whole other cycle that kicks in, which is converts all of those images that have been copied over to DNG. And the question is, yeah, do I have to really deal with that? No, you don't. You can do what I do, actually, and I just import everything. I use DNGs. I highly recommend DNGs. I'm not going to talk about DNGs, but I will during the workshop. I think I talk about it in the article series, and I send to you guys. But I absolutely would convert to DNGs. If you're not, I generally recommend it. There's not a lot of good reasons that I know of to not do that. One of the reasons is to contests. There's some contests that don't like DNGs, photo contests, but whatever. In terms of your workflow, in terms of a format that's going to be more efficient, that it develops faster, that's safer, DNG is a good archival format. Anyway, I don't do that. So I will import my images. I do not convert to DNG, but then like at night before I go to bed, there's a little button I can click and say, select all the files, click it, and it will then convert all the DNGs, and I don't have to worry about it interrupting my workflow or slowing me down or anything like that. Anyway, organized by state, you can separate flagged from unflagged files, colored, things that have been colorated, not colorated, or colorated by green, but not another color, etc. So you can organize by state. So there's lots of different types of organization. Now, what runs all of this, I know for some of you, this is going to be redundant, but you gotta know this word. You gotta know what it means. You gotta know, most importantly, how Lightroom uses this stuff. And I'm going to flip around this again and add another graphic to it because it's important, metadata. So let's get through the redundant stuff. Well, let me say this, because this is why it's important. This is why it's important, because to become a master in Lightroom, learn and understand how Lightroom uses metadata. Learn what it is, most importantly, how Lightroom uses it. If you can wrap your head around that, you've mastered the program. Easy. The power of metadata. First of all, the redundant stuff. Metadata is just simply data about data. This will make sense as I go for those of you who don't know this term yet. There are two types for us photographers, developmental and organizational. What we're talking about today is organization, keywords, type of metadata. But developmental, absolutely. Take an exposure slider in the develop module, move it up a little bit, may add a little contrast. That information is saved as metadata. There is catalog level and file level. This is important to know as you move forward as well, because there's metadata that you can add, say like a keyword. A keyword is saved in two locations, depending on your preferences. It's saved in the catalog automatically. Any metadata you save is always saved at the catalog level. Some of it, however, can be and should be saved at the file level as well. Now, Lightroom has the capability in the preferences of automatically taking metadata and saving into the file, which is a great way to back up work that you're doing. I'll show you where that's located later. But anyway, catalog level, file level. I mentioned keyword is something that can be saved as both. But then there's other kinds of metadata, like a color rating. Believe it or not, a color rating, if I start tagging my images green, it's a way to separate some images from others. Some of you might be using it to separate your good images from your bad images. All the greens are good, all the reds are bad. Well, it's catalog level metadata and not file level metadata. So you have to kind of get a feel for what's what. So here's what pertains to us. There's XMP. Anytime I add a keyword, anytime I move that exposure slider, as I mentioned, XMP is the kind of metadata that Adobe creates. As I have at the end there, it stands for Extensible Metadata Platform. You don't need to remember that, but do know that it is Lightroom generated metadata. You might have seen examples of XMPs if you do any work against your native file format, not a DNG. Here's another reason to go with DNGs. If you've ever done any kind of work in terms of adding organizational or developmental metadata to your image with your native raw format, an XMP file, whether you know it or not, is automatically created. Why that's automatically created is because the Nikons, the Canons, the Olympuses, the Sonys out there, their native raw formats are proprietary. You cannot write directly to the file, which means you cannot save Lightroom generated metadata to the file. So Lightroom creates a sidecar file, which is the same name, has the same name as the native file, but then it's tagged XMP because that's storing all of that organizational and developmental metadata that you're creating in the program. So XMP. Then there's EXIF, metadata or exchangeable image file format. Don't need to remember that as well, but know that that is metadata that's camera generated metadata. Looks like this. You can see it in Lightroom. You can see it in the metadata panel in your library module. And if you open this, it's pretty comprehensive. It has the file path, the dimensions of the image after you cropped it. So if you crop in an image, look at it. How much did you crop? We've taken a resolution from this to this. Is that a good idea if you want to make large print from it? Of course, the date, the time, the settings that you had on your camera, aperture, shutter speed, whether or not a flash fired, what the distance was from the lens to the subject. It's pretty comprehensive. And of course, the camera you shot with, the serial number of camera, etc. Camera generated metadata. And then there's IPTC, International Press Telecommunications Council. Don't need to remember that either. But that is user-generated metadata, something that we add to our images. And of course, you can see that also in the metadata panel in the library module, just at the top there, switch from EXIF to IPTC. This is small here, so let me zoom into this one for you. There's only a few things that you should really need to fill in for this. What's interesting about this, or great about this, is you can make a template that just automatically adds to your images. You don't have to do this every time to your files, but the creator, or the job title, if you have a job title, where you're located, what your email address is, what your website or your URL of your website is. And then, of course, toward the bottom of that panel, you can see there's places where you can add metadata, which then tags, and this is the important part, the copyright. If you care about the copyright and you care about your images, do what I do here. It's copyrighted. I add that copyright to my image, the year, my name. I, under rights usage terms, add rights managed / all rights reserved. Of course, there's other kinds of usage terms like Creative Commons and royalty free and so on. And you can tag them by such. You might want to take pictures and share them and not care about licensing them like I do. But that's the place where you can do that. You can add your copyright to your image as well. So user-generated metadata. But where all this kind of becomes interesting is how we filter through this metadata. Now, as I said before, if you learn what metadata is and how Lightroom uses it, you've mastered. Well, the punchline for that is understanding, starting to wrap your head around, how to filter through the metadata. Because I've showed you there's Lightroom generated, there's user generated, there's camera generated. But how do we use that? How do we know that's all there? But how do we start sifting through it so we can stay organized? Well, we can filter by way of text. We can filter by attribute. Attribute is a flag. Attribute is a star rating. Attribute is a color rating. There's file type, of course, PSDs versus DNGs versus TIFFs versus JPEGs. We can organize by file type, filter through by file type. And then there's this general metadata term where we can start to filter by way of all of those things that I was talking about there previously in terms of type of metadata. To give a better view of what I'm talking about here, this is an anatomical breakdown, if you will, of what a modern digital file looks like in terms of metadata. All this stuff is attached to, and this is just, half of what we can really attach to our files, especially if we get into, thoroughly keywording our imagery, which I don't necessarily think you need to do, especially if you're new to organizing your images. If you're not new to organizing images, you just want to learn how to do it more efficiently, or you have a really big archive, then yeah, some keywording might be the thing to do. I don't think you need a lot of keywording. With the kind of keywording workflow that I used to have versus what I do have now, it's very different. And I say that because I used to want to sell stock photos. So when I sell stock photos, I would have to keyword my images, not just in the way that I could find them, but I really had to keyword my images in a way that I thought potential clients would have to find them, because people from all kinds of disciplines, from magazines, from book publishers to nonprofit organizations, I mean, go down the list, would sift through my archive of images, and they would do keyword searches based on their needs, not mine, based on their needs. So I would have to create a really robust hierarchy of keywords, again, trying to predict what potential clients might do to try and find this particular image. I don't do stock photography anymore. That industry is not what it used to be. So I'm just worried about me finding my work. How am I going to look for this image that I took in Africa 5 years ago? I only need to have a few keywords to tag it, but I digress. So here's an anatomical breakdown. Here's a bit of a more comprehensive view of when I said metadata is a way to filter through images. This is literally like you can go into the metadata section of the library filter, and you can click a button, and then you can select one of these many different ways of sifting through the metadata of your images to narrow down your searches to find this image based on not just categories, but exit data, the date, the file type, the camera serial number, the lens, the focal length. But I mean, look at this list here. It's pretty amazing. Now, what's really amazing about this, if it hasn't kind of sunk in yet, is that, and this is the big punchline for organizationally using databases with modern digital files, is that we get to look through our library in all kinds of what I'll call creative ways that we might not have considered previously. And I say previously, like, before databases, before we were able to use metadata with digital photography, the way we kept track of our work was we would, I shot positive, I shot slides. We would put categorical information on our slides. I would write, this is what this is on this slide. I'd put like a little catalog number on it, and I'd put it in the sleeve, and then the sleeve was labeled, and then I would put the sleeve in a file cabinet, and then the file cabinet would have sections that were labeled again, and then close the drawer, and the drawers were labeled. Everything was labeled categorically. That was great, but because the files we're working with now are so metadata rich, we can sift through our libraries in ways that we never thought possible. For example, look at the top middle thing there. It says shutter speed. Well, what that means really is going through the library filter, I get to then start to look at images that are shot, not just shutter speed, but with a particular kind of shutter speed. Images that are shot with, say, 500ths of a second or faster, or images that are shot with a quarter of a second or slower. What that means is that I get to now start to isolate images through my body of work over the duration of all the time that I've been adding to my catalog, by way of, I want to look at images that I shot with slow shutter speeds, things that are moving, things that are flowing, versus things that I'm stopping motion, so things that are really fast. Or I can look at stuff by way of lens. I can analyze my macro photography versus my telephoto photography, or stuff with a lot of depth of field versus not a lot of depth of field. So I can start to sift through my library in all kinds of creative ways to analyze how my style of photography has changed over time or evolved over time, or I just want to look at a set of images in that particular way for some application that I have. Really kind of cool. Think about all the ways that you can start to sift through your library to analyze how you shot or how you've done things over the years. Of course, it's all about, in terms of filtering, it's all about understanding how to use the library filter and smart collections. Okay, and with that said, I'm going to actually jump over to Lightroom. We get out of this program here, and I'm just going to show them to you. And you get a bigger view. So the library filter is at the top here, okay? And if you don't see it, It can go away, it can disappear, it can come back. That's happening because the backslash key right above my return key is being tapped. If you don't see it, tap that key, it's going to come right back. Okay. Of course, you got to be in the library module to see the library filter. You're not going to see the library filter if you're in the develop module. You're not going to see the library filter if you're in the print module. So to see the library filter, you got to be in the library module, and you got to tap that key until it pops up at the top of the screen here. So like I said before, we can sift by way of text. If I click on this, you can see we can type in a keyword, maybe a keyword, or EXIF metadata, or IPTC metadata, or whatever you want. If that word is attached to your image in some way, we can just type it in there and it will start to sift through our library. And of course, with these drop-down menus, we can refine that search in all sorts of ways. We can just search with an IPTC or just search with an EXIF, searchable metadata, keywords, captions, titles, copy name, file name, etc. Attribute is already clicked, an attribute which is underneath text. Let me unclick that and click it back. There we go. This is what I was saying before. Attributes are flags, attributes are star ratings, attributes are colors, okay? So if I click on this, where I've done, I've already selected my flag. Now I've filtered out everything that is flagged. So one of the things that I do, I mentioned before, some people might have a workflow where they color code images they like green. Those are the images that I like, and then the images that I don't like are red. And that tells us to throw those away. Most people I find use star ratings for separating, as I said before, the wheat from the chaff, the ones that we like, the ones that we don't. I don't do that. I use flags. Nothing wrong with using star ratings. Nothing wrong with using color codes. I don't really care. Do whatever you want to do. If you're already using one already, do it. The idea is to separate, again, the images that you like from the images that you don't like. If you're doing that already, some other method, great, do it. Why I choose flags is because it's easy. I have a bit of a method that I call the PUX method, or PUX, as I'm cycling through images. I can go from here to this image, to this image, to this image. As I go, I hit the P key to select it, or I hit the U key to unfilter. Let me take this off here. So as I'm going through, see, there we already have a set of images where some are flagged, okay? And then some have, instead of a white flag, there's a black flag there. That black flag means that image is rejected. The X key, P for pick, U for undo, and undo, whether it's white or black, means it's unflagged. And then the black flag to reject it. As you can see, all my rejected images are kind of grayed out, so they're not as visually, they're more of a visual, they're not distracting anymore. That's the word I want to use there. So they're not distracting anymore. They're grayed out, visually unobstructed. So one of the great things about this method too, is it's really easy to filter out images that have been rejected. So again, as I cycle through, I like it, I pick, I like it, I pick, I like it, pick, or I don't like it, I leave it, or I don't love it, just leave it unflagged. Like this one, flag it. But then as I go and I start to delete it, my lens cap is left on, delete it, or excuse me, reject it. That's what I want to say. X key, X, X, X. Let's do a few more down here. Just watch as I go. X, and then it goes to the next slide. X, X, X. I've just rejected all these, okay? So it's a quick kind of run through your images after you've imported them. Pick them if you like them, X them if you want to reject them. And what the cool thing is about that, if I then go and I hit the Apple Command Delete key, this happens automatically. My attribute filter opens up, my rejected images are automatically filtered out, and then Lightroom automatically asks me if I want to remove those rejected images from Lightroom or if I want to delete them from the disk. And there's an important distinction here. As you're deleting images out of Lightroom, yes, you have an option of doing one or the other. And if you remove them for Lightroom, I think the next option implies what's going to happen there, the next option being deleting from disk. Removing from Lightroom will remove them from the catalog, but they will stay on your hard drive. So if it's a kind of image where, again, you just left your lens cap on or you were holding that shutter down accidentally and the water drive was running, delete those from disk is what you want to do. You want to remove them from, you do not want to just remove them from the catalog. You want to dump them, get rid of them. Um, I don't have a great example of images you might want to remove from the catalog and not from Lightroom. There's an image that's on my hard drive. I want it in my catalog so I know what it is and I know how to find it. But those are your two options. If you want it gone, hit delete from disk. But this is great because this is like step one for filtering. As you reject as you go, hit Command Delete on the Mac. It will automatically filter those out for you. And then you select, and then you can hit delete from disk and it's done. Okay. And then, of course, the metadata panel. And this is the one that's kind of fun here, in the sense that as I click on this, I have 4 panels now. Excuse me, 4 columns to work with here, and it actually starts to filter out images going from the leftmost column onto the right, starting with date. Look at this. For those of you that are already organizing all of your files by date, you don't need to do that. If the date is set in your camera properly, when it's important to do that, and you can see why now in terms of having your metadata, keeping track of things properly for you, everything is automatically organized by date for you, in this case by year. And then of course, if you open a year, then you have the months, and if you open the months, you have the days. But everything's automatically organized for you. Now, if I move this over to keyword, other kinds of categorical information. If you're keywording your stuff categorically, and you're also adding categorical information to your folders, that's redundant. You don't necessarily need to do that. So I'm not saying to do this and not do that. Let's understand this. What I'm starting to highlight for you here is that you can add categorical information to a folder. You can add a categorical information to a keyword. You can add categorical information to a collection. But what I want you to keep in mind is this. If you're doing that to all those places to keep track of yourself, it's redundant. You're creating extra work for yourself. So in terms of starting to figure out what a good workflow is for you, pick a place that's easy. Pick a place that makes sense in terms of where you want to add your categorical information to, and then you can do that. Now, let me come out of the metadata panel, for example, here, and say you're the kind of photographer that just doesn't want to keyword. They don't want to go through that. I don't want to add categorical information. Your workflow is you make a folder, you add Africa to that, you make another folder, you add Grand Canyon to that. No problem. You can see all those categories in the folders panel, because in the folders panel, you get to see the names of all of your files. I don't do that. Sorry, I'm showing you a catalog that is not well organized, but I have all kinds of files here that are named different ways. If all of your folders, excuse me, I said files, I meant folders. If your folders are named Africa, Grand Canyon, California, Alaska, all that categorical information is there, and you can see the folder names in your folders panel. So you don't necessarily need to then add it to a keyword or add it to a collection, but you might want that redundancy too. I digress. Okay, back to the metadata panel. We can start with, say, date, and then from date move over to another one and say, let's pick 2022. In 2022, in this catalog, I have 246 images that I shot in that year. I could filter by way of that. Or I can hold down my command key and select multiple years. Say I want to shot everything from, see everything that I photographed from 2020 on. All right. Well, then the next column, I get to choose how I want to refine my my filtration even more. I can go from year to camera, or year to label, or year to GPS data if you're tagging GPS data, but go down the list. It's pretty amazing what we can do with filtration. There's all kinds of ways we can stay organized. Again, the key is to understand metadata, understand how Lightroom uses metadata, understand how to add metadata to your catalog and to your files, and you're gold, okay? Filtering, that's the basics of it. Now, I also said smart collections. Now, smart collections is a way to, I'll phrase it this way, a way to save a metadata filter, or if you will. So let's select a group of images here. Actually, no. We're not, this is not about selecting, my apologies. So the way a smart collection works, now there's creating creating a collection, which is just simply selecting a bunch of images and setting aside for a particular application. I talked about applicative organization before, right? So the way we do that is we hit create collection, and we can name this for slideshow or for print or whatever it is. And then that set of images is set aside for us to access later for whatever application, okay? That's one way to stay organized applicatively. We also have the option of creating what's called a smart collection, which is very different than a regular collection, which is often used again for applicative organization. And what a smart collection allows us to do is, as I mentioned a second ago, allows us to kind of save a metadata filtration. So, for example, let's name this. Well, let's come back to them. Now, what I can do is here's this. Come over here to this section. There's a similar kind of list of different kinds of metadata. We can organize by rating or create collections automatically, I should say, by rating, by flag that's picked, by color label, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go by way of flag, because as you saw, I had a bunch of flags, and I had some that were rejected. I didn't delete those yet. It shows you the option of I can remove from catalog or delete from disk, but I didn't actually do anything. So let's go to pick flag. We have the option of is or is not flagged. We can go flagged, unflagged, or rejected. Okay, so let's just create a smart catalog that is rejected. Match all, and we're going to call this rejected photos. Okay, we're going to hit create, and look what happens. Automatically, the rejected photos smart collection pops up and is populated with 975 rejected photos. Okay, now at this point, of course, I can select all those. I can hit the delete key, and you can delete permanent. We can go from there. But going back to creating a smart collection, we can do that. We can go by way of flag. We can go by way of color. We can go by way of text. Does or does not have a smart preview, that does or does not have snapshots. The list goes on. Source. The source is in a particular folder name, a particular collection, published collection. It just, the list goes on. File names, file types. There's a great way to start separating your PSDs from DNGs, from TIFFs, from JPEGs to your native file formats. Go by file type. Or a DNG with fast load data. I don't know why you need that, but some people might want to need that. But the list goes on, and you can create multiple tiers in these in a particular set. So here's one that is flagged, rejected. Let's move this to one that is flagged. But then I can hit the plus key. But I want to see not just stuff that's flagged, but I want to see stuff that's flagged and has a rating that's greater than or equal to 4 stars. And then I could add another tier to this smart collection and go that has a color label that is red. So now I'm going to have a smart collection that's automatically finding all my flag stuff, but within that flag stuff, I have star rated stuff, and within that flag star rated stuff, I have color coded things. And then everything is automatically made in that smart collection. So smart collections are fantastic because they take the metadata filtration stuff that we've looked at here, and it's like times 10. We can do thing on top of thing on top of thing, and we can hit that plus button in here. We can hit that plus button here again and again and again and again and again and again and again. And it's saved. That's the difference, is that each time we go through here and we go through a filtration, we have to come back and do it again for another kind of filtration. Of course, that's not saved. We're just redoing it each time. One thing I should mention here, since I'm showing in the smart collection panel, in the smart collection way, how we can add and add and add. Well, we start with 4 columns, I should point out, but we don't have to have 4 columns. We can remove some of them to go down to, I think as little as 1, remove this column, or remove this column. Let's test that theory here. Maybe remove 1 more, or remove this column. And now we're just searching by way of date. Or we can add. Add column to the right. Add column to the right, add column to the right, add column to the right. Now we're back to 4, but you get the idea, right? Add column to the right. And we can go, when I wrote my book on Lightroom several years ago, I forgot to mention, I wrote that book called Creative Workflow on Lightroom. I think at the time I wrote that, the limitation for the amount of columns we could put in was 20. I haven't tested that in a few years, but there was a limit to that. You can do as many as 20, but you can start with date and go down to camera and go down to flag and go down to color. You get the idea there. Pretty cool. That's how smart collections and library filters work. Okay, in a nutshell. Now, again, this is a basic thing. Just want to kind of give you an overview of the kind of organization that's available to you. The articles that I'm going to send you are going to give you a deeper understanding as to how to start practice that. And then December 9th, if you want, we're going to have a full day on going into more depth. And we're going to go into all from importing and and then some keyword strategies and collection set strategies and categorical versus applicative versus qualitative versus organized by state strategies. We're going to go through all that stuff in the deeper workshop. But to get started, my top 5 tips for getting organized now. Number 1, keep your archive in one location and on one hard drive or a hard drive away. Excuse me, or a hard drive array. Say that 3 times fast. And there's a few of you that have asked questions or hinted to in your questions that you're actually working with multiple catalogs. And one question, for example, asked if we can have multiple catalogs and have a way of finding images in catalog B while you're in catalog A. Nope, can't do it. And not only can you not do it, but it's actually the fact that you can do it is the reason why I'm saying what I'm saying now, and that is have everything in one catalog. Think of Lightroom as not like a typical program like Photoshop. Lightroom is a database, and a database's whole purpose, a database's whole job is to manage assets for you. So if you're taking your assets and you're spewing them over the multiple catalogs, you're using the benefit of working in a single database. So have everything in one. Do not use multiples. You can separate things categorically by the ways I just suggested to you. So if it's by job, you want to have your personal stuff separated from your art stuff. Well, you still have them in one catalog, but just separate them by simply adding a few categories by way of collections or keywords. Or if you're doing stuff by data, excuse me, by camera, then do it that way. I have a lot of people have iPhone images versus their traditional camera photographs, and they want to have different catalogs for that. No need. Put them all in one catalog. It's easy through a quick sifting of iPhone through metadata versus traditional camera through metadata to just separate one from the other. But don't miss the opportunity of having everything in one database so you can find one versus the other, or this versus the other, and not having to worry about, as that person is asking that question, can I look at this catalog while I'm in this catalog? No, don't do it. Keep everything in one, and keep everything in one on one hard drive or one hard drive array as well, for reasons that I'm going to in the articles and the workshop. Add categories somewhere, as I'm pointing out. Add them somewhere. And part of my screen is blocking part of my screen, so let me move something. Excuse me. Now I can read this. Here we go. Add categories somewhere and make them where it's easy to make them, and make them where it's easy to find them. So this just goes back to what I was saying to you before. If you already have a workflow established where you like dumping stuff into a folder and naming that folder Alaska, Grand Canyon, Africa, do it. And then you can just simply find that stuff by way of looking in the folders panel. You don't need to go, by the way, important, you don't need to, by the way, leave Lightroom, go into your folder and find your images that way. It's a database. It keeps track of everything for you. Don't leave Lightroom. Go to the folders panel. Look at the hierarchy there. they're all there. If you see an image, here's an important thing you can do as well. If you see an image and you don't know what folder that image is, but you want to see other images in that folder, at any time you can come to an image and you can control click or right click on that image to bring up the context menu. And at any time you can say go to folder and library, and then that will take you to the folder in your folders panel. There are the other images, okay, at any point. You do have the option, of course, of going, if you for some reason need to actually go see that actual image on your actual hard drive, which I'm suggesting you don't need to do. You could at any time, sure, go show and finder and verify its location. But you just need to find the folder because we're talking about categorical organization. So at any time you can do that. Okay, back to this. So add category somewhere. You're already doing it there, great. If you want to have a more robust sort of categorical set of metadata attached to your file, when I add keywords, like I said, I don't do it as thoroughly as I did before, but I do it. When I do it, I kind of have this five-fingered approach, which I add these are all the keywords I add now. Look, the region, specific location, subject, secondary subject, and the miscellaneous. And miscellaneous could be a style that I'm working with, color versus black and white, slow shutter speed versus whatever. It's miscellaneous, a job title, a project I'm working on. But region, specific location, subject, secondary subject, and a miscellaneous keyword. That's all I ever need to add to it. I used to add, if I shot a photograph of a sea lion, I would put the scientific names in there as Lophus californianus, and I would put the family and the order and all that stuff. Again, I'm trying to predict how people looking through my library are trying to find stuff, but I'm not doing that anymore. I'm just trying to find images myself. So the five-fingered approach is all I need. I'll just put sea lion in there. I don't necessarily even need to distinguish stellar from California, but if I'm shooting sea lions all over the world, maybe I'll add that category. But sea lion, Monterey, that kind of tells me what I'm doing. There's no stellar sea lions in Monterey here. Anyway, whatever you're doing, if it's working, great. But those are some additional options for you. Number 3, learn how to use compare view, survey view, and people view. In the library module, these are fantastic tools for starting to sift through sets of images when you're, as I put before, trying to separate the wheat from the chaff, the good from the bad. Well, there's good is relative. There's good and there's really good and there's kind of good. So one of the reasons why people use star ratings, because there's 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars, and it's kind of all relative as to which one's kind of good, really good. Yeah, it's so sort of good, really good. Well, that kind of workflow personally drives me nuts. However, there is a part of your workflow as I've gone through my flagged images where I need to separate the stuff where that eye is really sharp, or an expression is exactly the way I want it, or the tilt of an animal is tilted in just the way that I was looking for to give a particular expression that says something to me. Well, to do that, these 2 ways of sifting through your images are very helpful. And they're down here. Whoops. Down here on the toolbar, we have survey view and compare view. And then, of course, there's people view. Now, another question that I got from one of you was about the people view. And do I have any particular tips from that as you're having trouble with people view crashing on you or not working right? It sounds like a bug. I haven't had those kinds of problems with the people view. For those of you who haven't used people view yet, this is face recognition technology that was built into Lightroom, gosh, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago now. And it works really well. It's a way for you to, if you take lots of pictures with people or family members, or you do a lot of portraiture, Lightroom has facial recognition technology that will often separate people, from by way of faces, and then you can keyword accordingly. Oh, this is mom, this is dad, this is baby, this is sister. And then you can keyword very easily by way of people view. All right. back to my list here. Number 4, practice using the library filter, and then practice it some more. As I said, and I'll say it again, if you understand what metadata is and how Lightroom uses it, you've mastered it. And the best way to do that is to actually just start playing with the library filter and start making some smart collections. The more you do that, the more you get a feel for how Lightroom can play with metadata, how your database sees metadata, how you can then start adding metadata to your images in ways that are going to help you a year or 2 years from now to stay organized. It's really important that you start to get a feel for how the library filter works and how smart collections work, and do it now and then do it tomorrow and then do it the next day. That is a very big and important tip. And then lastly is make a set of, well, I've already said it, make a set of smart collections that best suits your needs and your workflow. Do you want to have a view automatically of everything that's flagged? Do you want to have a view of everything that's been keyworded versus not keyworded? So then you can go back and revisit the stuff that's unkeyworded to add keywords. Or for the person that asked that question before about the DNGs, and I said, I don't do DNGs right away. I do it before I go to bed. Well, what if you forget? Create a smart collection that will look at the everything that's not a DNG. And then you can just go back, select those, click another button, and then convert all of that stuff to DNG. And the list kind of goes on and on and on. But yeah, smart collections, very, very important. So these are top 5 ways of, I suggest you can start to get organized now. And that said, if my co-host here, Effie, is listening and I can hear her, she might have some questions for me from you guys. Otherwise, I still have some questions that I can go through that need answering and see what time it is. I'm doing pretty good on time. Effie, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. We can hear
Okay,
you.
just a couple of questions submitted via the Q&A.
Okay.
Could you explain the exclamation marks on your images and what that means?
Yes, good question. There are 2 types of exclamation marks. Let me see if I can pull one up here. I know where I have an image that I want to pull up here. Excuse my messiness for a second, but I want to pull this image up here because I lost it. No, it's under downloads. Here it is. This is the image. Boom. So this is an anatomical view of the metadata that we can see on a thumbnail. I almost included it in the presentation tonight, but it kind of took me off track. But because of the question, I'm bringing it back. So yeah, you can see all of this stuff that you can see on your thumbnails. If you're not seeing it already, you can go to view options and turn this stuff on. It's very helpful because it tells you all kinds of things about your image in terms of organizational and developmental metadata. So a quick thing down here on the metadata badges that you're seeing, this little icon there, the plus minus, that shows you that your image has been developed. This one next to it, that shows that your image has been cropped. And this one next to that, that shows that your image has keywords added to it. Anyway, there are 2 types here of exclamation points to answer your question. There's this one here on the left that shows a file is missing. Your file is missing, you've lost it, you need to find it. There's all kinds of reasons why it's missing. You may just simply have the hard drive that file that resides on unplugged from your computer. So Lightroom is just showing you that you can still see your preview, because as you import images in Lightroom, a preview is generated. But the file itself is missing. So like if you go into the develop module, you're not going to be able to develop the file. But this is also kind of one of the cool things about Lightroom, is that you can still actually add organizational metadata to the file, even though the file is detached from the catalog. So you can add keywords to it, and then if you reattach the hard drive later, that keyword will sync up, and there you have it. But anyway, then there's the one to its right, which indicates that the file has been changed by another program. So let's say you're doing something that I was kind of hinting you shouldn't do before, and that is, let's say you go directly to your folder. You're not looking at your stuff through Lightroom. You go directly to the folder which the image resides, and you decide, I want to open that image in Photoshop. I want to play and do a little test or a little adjustment of that thing in Photoshop. You open it, you do your thing, you close it. Well, guess what you just did? You just, you just change that file, the metadata of that file if you did things in ACR with it, right? So Lightroom knows that. Lightroom knows that okay, you just messed with the metadata. This file is different. The file has been changed by another program. So if you click on that little exclamation point, you'll get a prompt that comes up that says, do you want to overwrite the settings from the other thing or not? Or do you want the other thing to overwrite Lightroom's? And understand, if you click to overwrite settings from the other thing, that means that the metadata that's in Lightroom will erase the other metadata. Or if you want what you did in Photoshop ACR to come into Lightroom, then you click the other one and it'll come into Lightroom. But those are the two exclamation points are that you can see. What's the other question, Effie?
Are smart collections automatically updated all the time? And then I have one more after that.
Yes, that's simple. That's what's great about them, is because every time I'll add new, every time, let's say I have one like I created one like I did before, which is just looking for flagged images. Every time I flag a new one, every time I flag a new one, flag a new one, flag a new one, it automatically goes into the smart collection. Or anytime I hit the U key and undo a flag, it will automatically be removed from that smart collection. Next question.
Sure. This one is about the workshops. Are they like beginner friendly for advanced users, etc.?
I'd like to say all of the above. They're yeah, they're all of the above. They're geared for everybody. So there. Yeah. Was that the last question, sound like?
Yeah, but we have plenty that were submitted ahead of time.
I know. I'm going to go through as many of those as I can. We have 14 pages, so I'm going to go through them quickly. And again, there's some that are redundant, and it's big writing, so it should be less than 14 pages, but we did big letters, so bear with us. Anyway, let me look at a couple of these here. Yes, I need to learn how to organize all my backup hard drives with Lightroom photos on them. So all my backup hard drives. So I hinted at this earlier, and I want to say this a little bit more clearly. Yes, I said that we should all have everything in one catalog and one catalog to rule them all. And I say the same thing about a hard drive. Have everything in one hard drive and in one folder, and in one folder to rule them all. And that way everything can be in one location. So if you have everything strewn a bunch of array of different hard drives, get one. If you have terabytes worth of stuff, it's best to have a hard drive array. It's easy to get a 4 terabyte hard drive now. If you have 1 or 2 terabytes of data, sure, a 4 terabyte drive is more than enough. But the value of having a hard drive array is that, well, there are 2 kinds of hard drives that are sold on the market today. Ones that have hard drives that have crashed, and hard drives that are going to crash. It's going to happen. If it hasn't happened to you yet, get ready, because it's going to happen. So what hard drives array offer you is what's referred to as redundancy against hard drive failure, catastrophic failure. So a hard drive is going to die. So if you have an array, and you have, say, an array with 4 hard drives in it, and one fails, there's a buffer system that happens depending on how you have that array or that RAID array configured. And not to get too technical about this, I have another set of articles I can send you guys on this that is just on backups and talks about RAID arrays in depth, but I don't want to get too nerdy here. Point being is that an array will protect you against redundancy. If a hard drive of that array of 4 fails, no problem, you can pull that out, put another one in, you're good to go. Regardless of the situation, whether you have a single hard drive that's 4 terabytes or multiple hard drives, hard drive array, you absolutely should be, everybody, if you're not doing this, you've got to do this. You've got to back up, and you got to back up, and you got to back up again. Always think in terms of minimum triple redundancy all the time. You need to have a primary hard drive. You need to have a backup that mirrors that primary hard drive. It doesn't matter if it's a hard drive or hard drive array. A primary hard drive or hard drive array, a backup hard drive or hard drive array, and then a third one. And the second one should mirror it. And then the third one should be kept off-site. And I don't necessarily mean a cloud. Cloud is a good fourth option, but something that's kept off-site. You back everything up from your primary onto the third one. You keep it at mom's house. You keep it in a safe deposit box because things happen. Fires happen, floods happen, earthquakes happen, tornadoes happen. You know, you go down the list. These assets are irreplaceable. And we've worked on them for years. We worked on them. We've invested all kinds of stuff into creating this. Don't lose them. So keep it off site. Okay. But yes. So if you have everything on different hard drive arrays, consolidate. Everything should be on one. What is the best strategy when migrating a new hard drive to prevent loss of photo location in Lightroom? Simple. Let Lightroom do the work for you. And what I mean by that is when you're in Lightroom and you go into the import dialog here, there's 4 options. We have copy as DNG, copy, move, and add. Move. Let Lightroom, when you're working in this database, I'm hinting to it, and I'm going to hint to it again, don't go to the folder where your image thing is. Don't change something by going into Lightroom and creating that exclamation point that I was talking about before. Don't do anything. Don't ever move a file from one location to another, by the way. You can do that from Lightroom. But if you're moving things from one hard drive to another, let Lightroom do that for you as well. So first you would click the source. You, of course, make sure the hard drive is plugged in that you want to move the images from, and then the hard drive in that you want to move the images to. And then you select the source hard drive here and the source folder and the source set of images. You click move, and then you go over here, and this is over here is where you have the target location, and that's how you do it. Simple as that. So, importing, which I didn't talk about here, but it's really where organization begins, and I'm going to talk about it in more depth in the article series I send you, certainly in the workshop on December 9th. But importing, the question we have here is, I'm having technical glitch with importing where even though I select one folder, a new folder is created. I think it may have something to do in settings, but I need help. You might have to contact me on this one individually, but one of the things that might be happening is going on down here in the destination panel. As again, in the import dialog, we have this portion of the import dialog that allows us to choose our target location. It's a little confusing because there's really 2 places that we choose our target location. The first one is here. So I can click on this, I can go to other destination, and I can sift through my hierarchy on my computer to find that hard drive we want to copy or move our images to, the folder we want to dump them in. But destination is another location to where, look at this. We can, if I've selected it, we can also then choose to put into a subfolder, which we can then name here. So first thing I'd look to see is if this is checked. If this might be the source of your issue right here. So uncheck that. But then we can also then organize. We could have put something in the folder by date already. But then if we're telling it to organize by date and then one of these date configurations, it's going to start to add a set of folders by date within that. However, if we go to in one folder instead of by date, if we go to in one folder, then if we've already selected a particular folder here, then it's ensured to go in that folder without creating any subfolders by way of something that we've named or not named accidentally, or by way of date. So that's what I think is going on there. That's not fixing the problem. There might be some other bug. I'm going to answer a couple more questions here. Unless anything else has popped up. Effie, has anything else popped up?
Yeah, where is the best location for the catalog?
That might feed into my next question that I'm looking at the papers here. So the default, I'll say this, the default location for the catalog is, of course, in the pictures folder on your computer, whether you're using a PC or Mac. It automatically goes into your pictures folder. Nothing wrong with that location at all. It's a perfectly fine location. I have no reason to ever say move it out of the pictures folder and put it here, especially if you're backing up. By the way, you should be backing up your catalog. Okay, back up your images, back up your catalog. Very, very important. However, there might be one particular kind of workflow where I would suggest to not necessarily do that, or to at least have a version of the catalog that's moved off the picture, out of the pictures folder. But let me go through the questions here and see if that pertains. A workflow question: while traveling, this is what I'm referring to. I'll be traveling soon and will take my iPad with me. Can I use Lightroom? Actually, a different question I thought. Can I take Lightroom? Can I use Lightroom Mobile and store my images in Adobe Creative Cloud each evening while traveling, then add images to Lightroom Classic when I return home? Absolutely. But what I'll say to that is that if your Lightroom Mobile is already synced with that, with Lightroom Desktop, and you're putting them in a collection that's automatically synced with it, then you don't need to do anything. It's automatically synced. And how you determine that coming out of here, I mean here being the import dialog, is that in the collections panel, see if I can not fumble my way through this here. I'm going to fumble my way through this here. In fact, things have changed. I don't use the Creative Cloud, so this has changed since the last time I looked at it. But in short, the way we sync images through the Creative Cloud, and then of course get to play with them in Lightroom Mobile, is by way of collections. We make a collection of images. There's a button or two that we click, and that those images, smart previews, are created, and then those images sync with Lightroom Mobile. If we put images that we're shooting on our iPhones or devices, iPads, through Lightroom Mobile, those should then automatically in turn sync back up. So that communication is already happening if you've again connected these two already. Okay. The question I thought I asked there, which I'll get to here as a second question. This is while traveling. Is oftentimes photographers, this is kind of my workflow, oftentimes photographers will have, a laptop that we travel with, but then at home in our studio, we have a desktop and we have our hard drive array and our big master catalog in our studio, right? And our big hard drive array where all our master files are, the backups and all that stuff is at our home studio. But then there's what we do on our laptops. And kind of a tricky part of the workflow always is getting the images from our laptops that we traveled with into our master catalog. But while we're in the field, we're playing with all the images, and we're adding categorical metadata, and we're adding other kinds of metadata, developmental, organizational metadata to our images. We want to sync that back up into our catalog on our computer. But as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a kind of a good example of the importance of understanding catalog level versus file level metadata. If I were to take the hard drive that I traveled with, again, I've done a bunch of work in my catalog. I added all kinds of organizational metadata. Some of it's only catalog level. Some of it is not file level. So if I took that hard drive, unplugged it from my laptop, plugged it into my master catalog, and then imported those images, I would not necessarily see all of that stuff that I did on my laptop. Frustrating. So in order to ensure that you can move from one to the other seamlessly without losing any of that catalog level metadata, there's a couple ways to do this. One is you can have your catalog on your laptop, not in the pictures folder, okay? Instead, you can have your pictures folder, the catalog in your pictures folder on the external hard drive where your images is. So then you would just simply drag and drop, take your catalog from your pictures folder, drag and drop it onto the external hard drive. And then when you move that over to your master catalog, then what you do, instead of just doing a straight import, is you can come over to this part of Lightroom here, where you can go to import from another catalog. And if you import from another catalog and then point your master catalog on your desktop to the catalog, your travel catalog that's on your external hard drive, you will get all of that catalog level metadata any collections you've created, any virtual copies you created. Yes, virtual copies are catalog level only. Collections are catalog level only. All that stuff will migrate over. So that's one example of why I would say do not put a or do not keep your catalog in the pictures folder. But another way to do that is you can export as a catalog. So you can on your travel hard drive or travel laptop, instead of migrating the catalog out of the pictures folder, you can always grab a subset of the images you want to put into your master catalog, or excuse me, grab the images you want to put in your master catalog, which only might be, some of what's in your catalog, and select them and then click export as catalog. And then it will create another catalog that you put on your external hard drive that when you bring it over to your master catalog, you can import from another catalog. So that's just one example of that. See if there's any other big questions I want to get through. I think that's it. No, one more I kind of want to get through and then see if FB has any more. And that is the communication between Lightroom and Photoshop, which looks like a handful of you out there having some issues with. And first thing I would like to point out here is that if you're taking an image and you're going into Lightroom, one of the things that somebody mentioned in the question was, as they're moving from Lightroom to Photoshop, et cetera, is that they're all the layers they did in Photoshop are gone. There's a reason for that. Here's the reason, is that if you're taking an image and you're bringing it into Photoshop and you're creating a bunch of layers, and then you bring that image back into Lightroom, and then you play with it again in Lightroom, you have, and then you want to open it back in Photoshop again, that's a good way to lose your layers. But keep this in mind. If you're doing that kind of a workflow, you can click on your image to edit in Photoshop. That's rejected. All these images are rejected. Let's get an example of an image here that's actually on my hard drive. Excuse me a second. Do I have any images that are on this hard drive? Yeah, here's one. Here's one. So I can go to edit in Photoshop, and a dialog box will pop up that asks me, again, this is for an image that you brought into Photoshop, brought back into Lightroom, done a couple adjustments, and then want to bring it into Photoshop again. If you're working with that kind of image, you're going to get asked, do you want to bring this image back into Photoshop as the original, or do you want to bring it back in with the Lightroom adjustments? If you're choosing Lightroom adjustments, it's going to flatten that file. You're not going to have any layers. The only way to do that, to bring it back into Photoshop and maintain those layers, is if you select original. Of course, if you do that, then you're bringing it back into Photoshop without the additional Lightroom adjustments that you did. So, bit of a catch-22 there. But if you're missing those layers, that's what's happening. Okay. Pepe, any more questions?
Yeah. Do you make photos of your copies before developing so that you always have a raw file?
Do I make photos of my copies?
Yeah. So maybe like explain that the editing that you're doing is not actually happening on your raw file. Maybe that would be a way of answering.
Yeah, that's perfect. So yeah, I don't need to. Well, these two images here are kind of perfect examples. Let me zoom into these images right here. So I have this image, number 22, and it says 1 of 2. Okay, these images are it's the same image. But one image is color, one's black and white, and I have the second image here, the black and white image with this little, what I call little dog ear on it, little flap. Looks like it's kind of a corner of a page that's flipped backwards. That is an indication that this is a virtual copy. Okay, now I create this copy just to simply look at different versions of the image. But that's the only reason I do it. At any time with a raw file, now remember, one of the things I said at the beginning is that if I'm taking, there's developmental and there's organizational metadata. Now, when I'm working with a file in the develop module, and I take, as I said before, the exposure slider, move it up, and then the contrast slider, move it up, that's not doing anything to the file, but that information that is metadata is saved on the catalog level and to the file as well, okay? And how can I phrase this? This is kind of like a big thing about Lightroom to wrap your head around. And if you get this, it's another way of mastering Lightroom. When you're working on photos, and I sometimes confuse people when I say this, but it's really important. When you're working on your images in Lightroom, you're not working on your images in Lightroom. It's confusing to hear, but it's important to understand. Say it again. When you're working on your photos in Lightroom, you're not working on them. So what are you seeing here on your screen? If I'm not seeing my image, I'm seeing a preview file. Think of it this way. When you're shooting raw on your camera, you can't see raw data. It's raw, it's unprocessed. There's no color profile attached to it. It's not demosaicked. So you can't see it. So what you're seeing on the back of the camera is a low-res preview that's been generated and processed by the little computer in your camera to show you a version of that raw data based on what how Nikon tells the camera to process their image. If you're using a Sony, how Sony engineers tell that camera how to process an image. But what you're seeing is a preview file. It's the same thing that's happening in Lightroom. So when I'm adding a keyword to an image, I'm not changing the image. I'm just kind of taking metadata and setting it aside that this goes with this image. Same thing with developmental information. It's more confusing when we talk about developmental information, but it's the same thing as a keyword. The exposure slider moved up, or the contrast slider moved up, isn't changing anything about the source file. It's just metadata information that's kind of attached to the source file. What you are seeing changed in Lightroom is the preview file. So at any time, I can come down here to reset, lower right-hand button, and I can click reset. I can have 20 different versions that I've created of different developmental styles with this image. I can save every single one of them as a snapshot, or I can come here into the library module and view them as virtual copies. There are snapshots as a way to save different developments, and there are virtual copies as a way to save different versions of the image. In the develop workshop, I'll talk about the value of one choice versus the other. But I can have 20 different developments, and at any time, I can always click reset and go back to the original state of that raw file, or I should say that raw state of that preview file that Adobe is showing us here. Okay. So I think that's about enough time we have for now. Again, surprise, hopefully guest for the next Lightroom live workshop, but certainly within a couple weeks, I'm going to let you all know what the next topic is that we're going to be talking about, or who our next guest is. And a reminder here at the back end, we do have again the developmental workshop happening on October 14th. Simply go to bradleyphotographic.com and events, or bradleyprintservices.com and events to find that, to sign up if you want to join for an all-day, more in-depth look at Lightroom's develop module. And then to get more about what we're talking about today, organization, there's one on December 9th for the same locations. And then lastly, I'm going to tomorrow send everybody here a couple of articles, two articles as part of a 4-part article series on organization to help reinforce the concepts that we talked about today, but then we'll start going a little bit deeper. There's a lot to understand with organization. I know there's a lot, but there's more coming with those articles, with the workshop. Keep sending me emails and asking me questions, and there will be more webinars like this that will focus on specific topics or areas of organization to help you out as we go. So thanks everybody for chiming in, and hope to see you first Tuesday of every month, certainly in November. All right. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.